Hi, welcome to this How Do I video in which I will explain how to get started with developing new JavaScript control add-ins in Microsoft Dynamics NAV. This video is a part of CloudSure Step for Product Development series. In this video, we'll create a Visual Studio project that will contain the complete definition of a JavaScript control add-in, including the assembly needed to describe the control add-in functionality to the development environment, as well as the resource zip file that encapsulates the control add-in functionality. Also, we'll create a script that automates the deployment of the control add-in on the development machine to save time during the development process. We'll do this in 4 steps. I'll start by explaining the structure of a JavaScript control add-in. Then, I'll create a Visual Studio project with all the content necessary to produce the control add-in for both the development environment and the client side. Then, I'll show how to automate the deployment process, an important step that removes any downtime from your development process and boosts productivity. And finally, I'll define an interface in C# that the development environment will use to expose necessary events and know how to compile the CL calls into JavaScript. A lot of work, so we better get started. A JavaScript control add-in consists of 3 essential components: the .NET assembly written in C# or a .NET language of your choice that contains the interface which explains to CL how to communicate with JavaScript. Then the control add-in record in the add-ins table of your application, and finally a resource zip file that's imported into the control add-in record and that contains your client content, including images, style sheets, and JavaScripts. Let's take a deeper look at the resource zip file. Every resource zip file must contain a manifest, which is an XML document that declares the content of the JavaScript control add-in. Content can be images, style sheets, and scripts. A manifest can also reference external scripts which are downloaded from the internet instead of being embedded in the manifest. Also, a manifest can declare an inline script that executes once the whole page is loaded. Finally, the manifest declares the screen size your control add-in will request and also whether it allows resizing and in which direction. Once you create the manifest and folder structure that matches your declared resources, you must zip all these files together. This becomes the resource zip file. Once you have a resource zip file, you can import it into the control add-in record. Now that you know the components of your new JavaScript control add-in, let's create one. I'll start by creating a new C# class library and give it name JavaScript Demo. Once I have my project, I need to create an interface that defines the functionality that will be supported by both JavaScript and CL. I don't need this class, so I simply rename class 1 into iJavaScript Demo interface. Since the implementation is not in C# but in JavaScript, I don't need a class but an interface. Then I need to reference the Microsoft Dynamics NAV extensibility assembly, which I will find in my role-tailored client folder. I need it so I can decorate my interface with a control add-in export attribute. It identifies my control add-in to NAV. Next thing, I must sign my class library with a strong name. I'll show project properties, then go to the Settings tab, specify that I want to sign with a new file, and then create a file. Normally, you'd use a strong name file created from a trusted certificate. Now I'll add the content of my future resource zip file. It does not necessarily have to be a part of the same project, but it's a recommended way so you can keep all your source code of a control add-in in one place, and also helps with deployment automation as you'll see in the next step. So, I'll now create a resource folder. Inside of the resource folder, I'll add a subfolder called script, and then a subfolder called style sheet. Then I'll create a manifest file. I'll right-click the resource folder, then click Add, New Item, and then under Data select XML file. I'll call it manifest.xml and click OK. Here, I'll declare my manifest. It will request 400 by 300 pixels and it will declare 2 scripts. The first is jQuery, an open source framework which you'll probably want to include in most projects and that Microsoft also uses as part of NAV, and another is my own script. While you can link to jQuery from its internet location to improve performance, download a copy of the version you want to include and make it a permanent part of your resource file. The second script is my own script that will contain all JavaScript logic. I'll click Add, New Item, then under Web, select JavaScript file and call it demo.js. Finally, I'll create a style sheet and declare it in my manifest file. And that's all. The simple project is in place, so let's move on and automate the deployment. There are several manual steps involved in deploying a control add-in. They are simple, but they still require a couple of minutes of manual work that you have to do every single time you make a slightest change in JavaScript that you want to try out in NAV. Therefore, you can include a PowerShell script as a part of your build process and have that script create and maintain your control add-in. Here is my script that does the following: imports NAV management module, loads .NET assemblies referenced in the project, identifies the control add-in name and public key token, zips the content of the resource folder, and then imports the add-in into NAV by either creating a new control add-in or modifying properties of the existing one. I invoke this script for my post-build event, and thus every time I change something inside of the control add-in, I build my solution and it automatically updates NAV. It takes a couple of seconds and really saves a lot of time in development. Before I can invoke this script, I need to reference an external component that creates zip file from a folder. I'll click Tools, NuGet Package Manager, Manage NuGet Packages for Solution. Then I'll search for ionic.zip and then select unofficial.ionic.zip. I use this package because standard .NET zipping functionality will not work because it creates incorrectly cased folder names that NAV cannot use. Let's try this. There. It was fast, and as we can see, it has created the control add-in record and imported the necessary changes for us. One thing to keep in mind here is that to use this auto-deployment script, you must run Visual Studio as administrator. Otherwise, you won't be able to use all PowerShell features. Even though it does not play any role at runtime, the interface is critical as it explains to the development environment what kind of capabilities your control add-in supports. Your interface can define two things: methods, which will be implemented in JavaScript, and events, which will be published inside your page objects in CAL as event triggers. Obviously, CAL will call methods declared in the interface to invoke JavaScript, and JavaScript will call events declared in the interface to invoke CAL. Let's create two members in the interface: a method to invoke JavaScript from CAL and an event to invoke CAL from JavaScript. I'll use a known .NET delegate type event handler, but you may define your own delegate types to match the number and types of arguments to pass to CAL. Both of these members must be decorated with the application visible attribute for CAL to be aware of them. I'll then implement this interface in JavaScript. I have to provide a function for every method from the interface. When invoking event triggers in CAL, I have to use the Microsoft.dynamics.nav.invokeExtensibility method function. Then I'll create a simple page in the development environment, declare a control, set its properties to use my new control add-in, and then write a little code to respond to event and invoke a method. When I run this page, I can see that Visual Studio correctly deploys the control add-in and that CAL and JavaScript can now communicate through methods and events declared in the interface. And that's all. In this video, you have seen how to get started with developing JavaScript control add-ins for Microsoft Dynamics NAV. We have covered the topics of control add-in resources, how to develop a simple control add-in using Visual Studio, and how to use PowerShell to deploy it automatically during the development. To learn more about Microsoft Dynamics NAV and to watch more How Do I videos, visit the NAV Get Ready page on Partner Source. That was all. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this introductory video into JavaScript control add-ins. This video was brought to you by Microsoft and Cloud Ready Software.